Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Climate Convergence webinar. We'll just be getting started in 2 minutes. Thank you for coming. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Climate Convergence webinar, Fighting to Stop Oil and Gas Pipelines and Start Building a Better World. Tonight is a webinar, discussion, and also a fundraiser for the GitSam Legal Defenders Fund, and there'll be information posted in the chat frequently about how you can donate, and I encourage you to do so. My name is Allison Bodine. I am going to be chairing the meeting tonight. I'm a central organizer with Climate Convergence, and I'm chairing from tonight and would like to acknowledge that as a chairperson in Vancouver, I'm on the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I know many of us are calling in from different parts of Turtle Island of Canada and other parts of the world. If you are also residing on Indigenous territories, I hope you will take a moment to reflect on the responsibility we each have to the Indigenous nations to recognize, respect, support, and fight side by side for their historic and inalienable rights. Tonight's webinar is going to be an important time to reflect on what is a critical moment here in British Columbia, across this continent, and around the world. So many of us are continuing to deal with the impacts of a pandemic brought on by what really is a break in the critical balance between nature and humanity. So many of us suffered in different ways, excessive heat and flooding and all the impacts of the climate crisis. And others of us have suffered under what has really been the impacts of imperialism and of colonization on people across this continent and around the world. The Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline, the Coastal GasLink Pipeline, and the Line 3 pipeline, which we will discuss today, have much in common. These are climate-destroying projects that are being pushed forward by the government of the United States and Canada and their big business backers, despite clear opposition from the Indigenous nations whose traditional territories they cross. At the same time, if completed, TMX, CGL, and Line 3 will pump hundreds of thousands of meters of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which is just the opposite of the carbon emission reductions urgently needed to build a livable and preserve a livable planet. More importantly, and what really is so great about the panel here tonight, is that three pipelines face strong opposition movements, which continue in full force despite brutal police repression, military repression, and the criminalization of protest in defense of Mother Earth. We join this webinar tonight to hear important updates and ways to support the ongoing struggles against TMX, CGL, and Line 3 pipelines from organizers and land defenders on the front lines. We are here to discuss our tasks and perspectives for building a more united and stronger climate justice movement with a vision for a just and sustainable world, and building the fight for system change, not climate change. As I said, we will begin the webinar tonight with a panel of speakers, a really great panel of speakers, followed by a time for question and answer, as well as multiple prompts to donate to the Gitsan Legal Defenders Fund, which we'll hear more later about in the program. I encourage people to post in the chat, as you're already doing, where you're joining from, any thoughts you may have, or campaigns that you want people to support. But I encourage you to use the Q&A box that's part of the Zoom functionalities in order to ask questions, and that's where we'll track questions. Tonight's webinar is also being broadcast on Facebook, and we'll put the link in the chat for sharing, and will be put up on YouTube for later viewing within the next few days, and we'll put that link in the chat as well. For our speakers today, we are going to begin with April Thomas. April Thomas is a spokesperson for the Secwepemc Say No TMX defendants currently representing themselves in court for peacefully resisting the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline construction on their traditional territories. The floor is yours, April. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us in here tonight. What did you just wanted me to speak of the update? Okay.
That would be great.
Well, just a little background there. We were all arrested in 2020 for, it was originally a mischief. And when we were brought to the police station, it was civil contempt of the court injunction. And then later on, they changed our charges in January of 21 to criminal contempt of court. And they said it is still a civil matter with a criminal component. And then recently in our last court date, they we were I guess really confused about where we stood because all the COVID cases, or the civil cases, were being adjourned because of the Omicron COVID. And so, yeah, we inquired about that, and yeah, they turned around and said that our case is in fact a criminal trial. And just the day before our trial, the lawyer Fitzpatrick, she sent us an email stating that the proceedings for the trial, and it was in fact criminal. So just so people are aware that we were, right from the get-go, as soon as we began to get arrested, we feel like we were the courts, along with TMX and the judge and the Crown Counsel and the RCMP and the bands that are involved in signing this mutual benefits agreements. They're all conspiring and they're all manipulating the whole system to the point that they're trying to confuse us as to what kind of court proceedings that we're actually under. And they keep changing their mind and even not even giving us our disclosure information package that they're supposed to give to us before we even plead in the charges. So all along we've been saying, well, if this is a civil case and we want to be, where's our civil court papers that you're supposed to serve us? And because normally under a civil case you would be there would be remedies sought outside of court, and you would agree or disagree with what's being said, and that never happened. So and then if it was a criminal case, and we would have to say we're guilty or not guilty, and we never had that opportunity. And all of that would come after we're able to review our disclosure of information packages. And it took the Crown Counsel a whole year of getting it to us. And they kept saying it was because of the DVD, which they still gave us a police report and gave us a DVD 2 months later, and it took them a whole year. So there's been numerous delays, and we don't feel like our trial we're being treated fairly or equally or just. And it just feels like a real arbitrary system in which they're making up rules as they go along, and they're violating our rights all the way along as we go. And they're doing it intentionally because we're self-representing ourselves. So it feels like because we're self-representing ourselves, they're conspiring against us to manipulate us and into so that we don't know what proper procedures that our court case falls under. So yeah, it's been very trying, especially through the whole, what is it, year and a half or so we've been going through this almost. And we've gone through forest fires and floods and numerous amounts of deaths due to COVID and drug overdoses. And yeah, and we've had numerous delays, and the judges even gone so far to even blame us for the delays. This is Mother Earth. Mother Earth is, in my view, what the way I feel in my heart is Mother Earth is working with us. And, she's working hard, and we have to work equally as hard in protecting the land and the water from the destruction of and the risks to our safety and well-being that the pipeline poses. Like, people don't draw the connection to how sacred a lot of these sites are that the pipeline goes through, and how connected that is to us as Gelmuk, as the first peoples of the land, because it is our duty and role as Gelmuk to protect the land and the water and the people. And when we're not doing that, it's almost like we're, selling our soul in a sense, because, that's our role and responsibility. And if we're not standing up for it, then our people are going to be lost forever, and everything will continue to get destroyed. So as for our court case right now, we've been successful in adjourning the court cases, and so we finally got all of our disclosure and everything. And to me, like, a lot of the hiccups and holdups were in us proceeding in making our own applications to the court, is because we were confused because they kept changing their mind as if this was criminal or civil. And so now that we finally got that straightened out, we're able to proceed and start filing our own applications and take Canada to task and show them, like, on every level in every court system right up to the international courts. We want to show them that there is no rule of law in Canada. There is no democracy. There can't ever be, not when you steal our land and you make our people live in our own territory and treat us like trespassers and force us to live in fourth world conditions. Like, our people are dying and they're in poverty, and somebody has to care about that. And they've brainwashed so many people that people don't even understand why people like myself are out here, and the other 8 that got arrested with us on the pipeline. They wanted to drill underneath our river, where our sacred salmon have to travel through and spawn, where our rivers connect. And that's not right. So yeah, I just really want to give a shout out to all the other people, Miranda Dick and Saucis, Hereditary Chief Saucis, and the other ladies who are all brave enough to stand with us and make that stand for Mother Earth and for the water and the salmon. I don't know, is there anything else you needed to ask?
Thank you very much, April. No, I think that's a good overview. I mean, anything about how we could support, I think a big part of it is knowing what's happening, and having you here tonight has helped get the word out, because of course we don't hear about this on mainstream media, in the news every day, when really we should. When people are Indigenous peoples are being arrested and brutalized for defending their inherent and human rights, or when others are arrested for peacefully protesting in defense of Mother Earth, this should be mainstream news. It should be discussed across Canada, and it is not. So I really appreciate your time and energy you've taken to be with us here tonight. We'll put in the chat the Facebook group for Secwepemc Say No, Stop TMX, and so people can stay connected that way, as well as just your struggle in the Secwepemc territory and near Kamloops. For people that may not know where that is very much connected to our ongoing struggle here in the Lower Mainland against the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline, and across the entire route of the pipeline from Edmonton to the port here in Burnaby. So we have to work hard to stay united and connected to one another. And anytime that you need support or want to get the word out, please do not hesitate to let us know what we can be doing to support. I see a lot of solidarity in the chat, a lot of messages from across the United States and different parts of Canada. And thank you everyone for your words of encouragement, and to April Thomas and everyone else that is continuing to stand up despite these tremendous legal pressures, and really the government of Canada putting everything in your way to try and wear you out, to try and stop you from continuing your defense against Trans Mountain. So much solidarity to you, and we'll keep up the struggle. Thank you, April.
Thank you.
The next speaker here that I want to invite up has also unfortunately had a lot of recent experience in being brutalized by the RCMP, different representatives of the government of Canada or the government of British Columbia, and is also part of many who are not standing down. And really it is a pleasure to invite up Slatho Molly Wickham to join us here tonight. She is a Gidimt'en checkpoint spokesperson and a key leader in the Wet'suwet'en fight against the Coastal GasLink, or CGL, natural gas fracked gas pipeline. She was one of 29 people recently arrested by heavily armed RCMP officers, militarized police, while preventing CGL's plans to drill a tunnel for their fracked gas pipeline under the Wet'suwet'en River. So please welcome Slatho Molly Wickham.
Howdy, everybody. Sai Slatho Sydney. My English name is Molly Wickham, and I'm the spokesperson for the Gidimt'en Checkpoint, which is a reoccupation of Gidimt'en territory on Wet'suwet'en lands. We've been working to challenge the Coastal GasLink pipeline, which is owned by TC Energy, AIMCO, and KKR. For quite a number of years now. Gidimt'en Checkpoint's been established in December of 2018 and has faced 3 militarized raids by the police and by a special unit of police called the CIRG, Community Industry Response Group, which is a special unit of RCMP that's trained specifically to deal with resistance to industrial projects like the Coastal GasLink pipeline. The Coastal GasLink pipeline plans to be around a 670 kilometer pipeline going from northeastern so-called BC to Kitimat, to the coast of BC, and plans to liquefy natural gas, fracked gas, I should say, to be more specific, and export it over to Asian markets. This causes a huge problem for the Wet'suwet'en because we still maintain our traditional governance system through our hereditary chiefs. I hold the name Slatho, which is a hereditary chief name, a supporting chief name in our house group, which is the Cassia, the grizzly bear house of the Gidimt'en clan. We have 5 clans and we have 13 house chiefs that represent us. These hereditary chiefs after consultation with all of the clans years ago and years of consultation and meetings, said no to all pipelines through our territories because they cause great risk to not only our territories, but to all of the territories and the nations downstream from us, and to the world. Right now, CGL is planning to and preparing to drill under the Wedzin-Kwa, which is sacred headwaters to all of our river systems and home to countless numbers of salmon that spawn in our headwaters. This is one of the last pristine drinking water rivers that we have in our territories. We all Wedzin-Kwa on a daily basis. You know, I have 3 children and we live out on the Yinta Lludisbin, the Caskia territory that we're occupying, and everybody drinks out of Wedzin-Kwa. The Unistoten Healing Center gets their water out of Wedzin-Kwa. Our home has nothing but Wedzin-Kwa water in it for our children to drink, and we rely on this place. It's very important and sacred to us, and right now it's at threat. Not only would drilling under the river cause such a disturbance just by the sediment alone from going under the river, that could damage our drinking water forever. That could prevent us from ever being able to drink that water again. Right now, at this time of year, the smolts are starting to go back downriver towards the ocean. And they're planning to cause such a disturbance underneath the river. And they're saying that this is a safe practice, that they're not going to be, they're not going to be trenching the river. They're going to go under and then it won't have any side effects. But we've already seen the effects of this project on our water, on our rivers. In the springtime, the runoff alone has increased from its usual 3 weeks to 4 weeks to last year, it was 3 months that we couldn't drink the water because of the runoff from this project's construction already. They also plan to go through Lamprey Tselkaikwa, is Lamprey Creek, where Gidimden Checkpoint is located. It's an old village site, and it's an old village site because our people used to harvest lamprey eels from that area. They were a staple food of ours, and now those lamprey eels are blue listed. They are at risk. We have very, very little left. Those lamprey eels they are there in the river and present in the creek at all times of the year. And they plan to trench right through that creek. They've done all the pre-work in the fall where they destroyed archaeological sites with illegal permits to be able to come in and do that with our CMP standing guard while they destroyed our archaeological sites without permission. And that's basically what they're doing now, is that they have our CMP on the territory 24/7 monitoring. They have our CMP escorting all of the machinery into the territory. They're escorting all of the pipes that they're bringing in. Every piece of heavy machinery is being personally escorted by the Kurg team. They're spending millions and millions of dollars. After the first 2 raids, they had already spent $20 million policing Wet'suwet'en people on our own lands. Once this gas, if it was ever to make it, and the construction was ever completed, this would be after construction, and once in operation would be releasing 3.5 megatons of CO2 equivalent per year. That's 5.5% of BC's total emissions from this one project. And we know from having dealt with a lot of other companies that want to go through this area that CGL is the catalyst. This is the one where they want to push through, and this is why they're pushing so hard, why they have so much money and police behind what's going on, is because they have to make it through. They have to use this as an example that they will overrun Indigenous people who do not consent to the project. And this, when all of these pipelines were first being proposed, when CGL was first proposed, they were proposed as building a carbon corridor, was the term that was in the impact benefit agreements that were given to Indigenous groups along the pipeline route. A carbon corridor for all of the other pipelines that are to follow if Coastal GasLink is able to get through our territory and to the coast. And none of this is going to benefit British Columbians. None of this is going to benefit us. It's going to destroy our ability to be Wet'suwet'en people. It will destroy our children's ability to drink the water from the river, to do ceremony. Already, we can't bring our elders out to the territory. We can't have, they came out to do a medicine gathering. And they were followed by RCMP, and they were followed by private security. And we've had enough. There have been 3 militarized raids. This last militarized raid in November, there was an occupation of Coyote Camp. I was in our tiny house, which is a fully solarized home. The media talked about it as if these were makeshift huts, and they weren't. There was a log home that was built there. There were 2 tiny houses that were built there that were fully solarized and having people occupying and living in them. And they came and used our own axes and chainsaws for firewood and chainsawed down the doors and arrested me and other Indigenous women at gunpoint with attack dogs and sniper rifles pointed at us. And this is the Canada, this is the BC, this is the industry that people are investing in, and that's causing all of the chaos. And that raid happened while the floods were happening in BC, while there was a state of emergency in so-called BC. They were putting millions of dollars and hundreds of RCMP in our territory to criminalize us as Indigenous people, remove us from our lands, and jail us. We have a court date coming up on February 14th. Leading up to this is our first appearance. There are also other Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan land defenders who were also arrested on their territory, on the Ksamisu territory, who also have a first appearance on February 14th. And so we're launching a campaign to break up with Canada. The campaign is about calling Canada out for their abuse and for their lies and for their manipulation of Indigenous people that has been going on since the time of contact. In this time and era of reconciliation and finding our ancestors' children buried in the ground from residential schools, this is how they continue to treat Indigenous people in so-called Canada. And so we're asking people to visit our website at yintaaccess.com, and you can find this Break Up with Canada campaign, and you can tweet your MP, you can tweet the politicians from Canada and BC to tell them that we're not going to put up with it anymore. This court date will be drug on, like April was saying, that this has been drug on for them now for 1.5 years, almost 2 years. And their Coastal GasLink is planning to do the same thing with us. There were 30 people arrested in this one action, in this one raid, and everybody got conditions to not go back to the territory. I'm a Wet'suwet'en person. I live on the territory with my family. My husband was arrested for standing on the side of the road, having a fire to support me after I was arrested. And he has conditions that he can't enter the territory except for to go to our home and back. So when he's basically under house arrest, it means that he can't go and get firewood for us. He can't go hunting. He can't go get water out of the river for us to drink. We have 3 children that he needs to take care of, that we do all of those things together. We hunt together as a family. We get our water together as a family. We go and do firewood as a family. And so now he's being prevented from doing any of those things. And I'm being prevented from being on the territory as well, except for to do cultural activities. So these kinds of violations of human rights and Indigenous rights cannot be acceptable in 2022. These are things that we have to push back for, not only for the climate crisis that's happening right now, but for the bigger issues that are at hand as well, and how the climate crisis is intricately tied to Indigenous sovereignty. The way that Indigenous people are being treated is the way that the earth is being treated, the way that Mother Earth and the environment are being walked all over and destroyed the same way that we are being walked all over and destroyed. We've been here for thousands of years. We know how to live sustainably. Our system and our traditional governance is designed to ensure sustainability of our people and our territories. And so we need people to understand that this is an issue of not only the climate and the environment, but how it's tied to the injustices of Indigenous people. And we have to ensure that those things are taken into account and that people are supporting us, not just because it's good for the environment, but because it's good for the world. It's good for the systems to be challenged in the way that they are being conducted right now. We know that we also have a campaign against RBC. RBC is one of the biggest investors in the Coastal GasLink pipeline. They have $400 million invested in the construction of the pipeline. They are literally paying for the genocide of our people and the genocide of our river and the genocide of our salmon and our lamprey eels and the things that are most important to us. So please visit our website and see how you can get involved in our campaign against the investors in this project and the major Canadian banks that are funding the destruction of our lands and our people. I really appreciate you inviting me onto the panel today and having an opportunity to share with you what's happening in our territory. It's not always in the mainstream media, but this is an important issue that affects all of us, not just the Wet'suwet'en. The Wet'suwet'en have been standing strong to uphold our traditional governance. We should not be jailed or criminalized for being Wet'suwet'en and upholding our laws. Our laws are ancient, they predate Canada, they predate BC, and they're designed to live in a good relationship with the land. And that's what we are trying to uphold for all of our future generations. Awitsa.
Thank you very much for joining us here today, Slaydo, Molly Wickham. Want to encourage people to visit the website. It's been posted a few times in the chat, yintaaccess.com, for information on those important campaigns, to also donate to the Gitxsan Legal Defenders Fund. So some of the folks that were arrested in November of 2021, and they were standing in solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en Nation. They were from the Gitxsan, which is adjacent to Wet'suwet'en, and they are still facing these charges as well. Thank you for letting us know about the February 14th court date and that campaign. I think it is fundamental, and Climate Convergence echoes that we must demand dropping of charges against land defenders, against people peacefully protesting in defense of Mother Earth, Indigenous people defending their rights. That has to be an integral part of the climate justice movement, or we do not have a climate justice movement that we can stand on. Thank you for your time. Next, we've discussed a bit about how much this isn't being covered in mainstream media, these important really cases of brutalization of and criminalization of land defenders. And there are exceptions to this, of course, when it comes to independent journalists, people working day in and day out, like Brandy Morin. Brandy Morin is an award-winning Cree Iroquois French journalist from Treaty 6 territory in Alberta. She has covered extensively what has been happening in Wet'suwet'en and many other important issues regarding missing and murdered Indigenous women, and was part of CBC's Beyond 94 project, tracking the progress of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action. So Brandy Morin, the floor is yours.
Hi. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I've had the privilege of covering what's going on in the sovereign Wet'suwet'en lands since 2019. And I've covered it for various publications, some of them independent, some of them international media organizations. And I believe that this is one of the most important battles of our time. There is so much that encompasses what is happening in Wet'suwet'en territory. Now, I wanted to start by sharing a video that I that I created in the summer of 2020, when I accompanied Girimdin Hereditary Chief Gistewe, his wife and his sister, who are both matriarchs, to one of the man camps that CGL had constructed in Gistewe's territory. And this was the first time that they had seen the destruction to their lands. So I'm going to share my screen and take you there. Now, keep in mind, I took this footage on the fly using my cell phone, but you can get the picture. Look what they did. Oh my God.
Yeah, look at that.
Somebody's about everyone.
My beautiful land. My beautiful land. That's crap. I went in their backyard and built a big goddamn camp like this and ruined their land. Goddamn land. Nothing. Wars are in Europe and missing with all this crap here.
What's your name? Hi, what's your name?
I work for CGL Security.
Oh.
That's, I work for CGL. All the men coming in, how many of our young people are go missing? Why not? You don't give a shit. How many of our young kids are missing? All those women can't hear. Prove it. All over the place. How do I know you're not one? Bullshit. This is my territory. This is my land. If I went back to your house, there's something there. How would you like it? How would you like it if I went behind your house, there's something there without you knowing? You wouldn't like that, would you? Of course, you guys don't have a place of your own anyway. what we need in this land is a leader with guts and backbone. I said, these guys don't have no guts and backbone. They take all their orders from the industries and US. That's where they get all their orders from. They don't govern this themselves. They're giving away everything we have. That's the way I see it.
Okay. So that just gave you a look into some of the pain that these people experience witnessing the destruction of their lands. I mean, as Indigenous people across the board, we've come through so much destruction and violence as it is. And in the Wet'suwet'en territories, they're fighting for the last of what they have, the last of what hasn't been taken. Their area is some of the last kinds on the planet. This river system, the Wazinqua, that is sacred, is pure. You can actually drink straight from it and not get sick. It's not stripped of the minerals that are contained in it from, the mountains and the glaciers that feed it. That is something that's really rare in this day and age. And it's on the brink of destruction. What this comes down to, for me as a journalist covering this, it's not two-sided. There's not a CGL gets a perspective, the government gets a perspective in this. To me, these are about Indigenous and human rights being violated and willingly trampled on. I mean, if I were to, go to a war zone and report on civilians that were being attacked and bombed on innocent civilians, you wouldn't, report from the perspective of the bombers. That's what's happening here in Wet'suwet'en territory. And these people are standing against power and politics that are intricately connected to each other. They are driven by complete greed and the beast of colonialism, which seeks to rape and destroy in order to profit from. These territories are located parallel to the Highway of Tears. And those of you who don't know what that is, it is a notorious stretch of highway where dozens of mostly Indigenous women and girls have been murdered or gone missing. And as Molly said, the violence towards the land and towards the people of the land goes hand in hand. And it's rampant, it's out of control. And the police that are in there literally taking orders, which I have witnessed from the industry, and preventing the Wet'suwet'en from accessing their own territories, from harassing them. They're harassing them in their own territories. It's absolutely absurd and frightening that this is happening in so-called Canada, where you have these militarized police with sniper guns, AK-47s, attack dogs, helicopters. It is a war zone. And the people that are defending their Yinta and their Wazinqua are unarmed. They're armed with their ancestral knowledge. They're armed with being rooted in their sovereignty and their rights and their allies, because I think a lot of the allies of the Wet'suwet'en see it for what it is, and they understand what's at stake, because humanity has destroyed so much already. And it's coming for you. It's coming for all of us. If, you know, this project goes through, if their river system is destroyed, it destroys the people as well, because Indigenous people are intricately connected to our lands and waters. And that sets precedents across the board. So people are watching, you know, all around the world, this colossal, you know, battle, and the power imbalances are, you know, very, what the word would be, they're not in the favor of the Wet'suwet'en people. But I think what I've witnessed with them, I mean, they are, you know, strong in their convictions and unwavering, and inspiring people, despite all the chaos that's going on around in their territories. It's one of the most peaceful places that I've ever been to, that I've ever reported on. It's a really, really special, sacred place. So I encourage everybody to learn more about what's going on there, to support, you know, the people. And I will keep doing my best to report on the front lines, as well as, you know, a few of my other colleagues that have been doing amazing, you know, work there. Hi.
Thank you, Brandy, for that perspective and for your continued and ongoing constant work. People have been asking in the chat if you have the link to the video, and also if you could just post or let us know where's best to follow your work, to support what you're doing. And thank you for joining us here tonight.
Yeah, I can post a link to the video in the chat. It's just on my Instagram, and you can either follow me on my Instagram there, or if you're on Twitter, I'm at Songstress28.
Okay, great, thank you. So now we are going to hear from folks that have been organizing against the Line 3 pipeline. So another oil and gas project, an oil project in this case, that takes oil extracted from Canada, delivers it into the United States, and has been also a very important site of resistance. So I want to ask or introduce CJ and Tori, who are joining us from the Climate Justice Committee in Minnesota, which is a grassroots group that connects climate change to issues of sovereignty and self-determination, and have been active participants in the fight to stop the Line 3 pipeline. So CJ and Tori, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Allison. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to give some background information on Line 3 and the way it connects to struggles nationally and internationally. And then Tori is going to tell us about the frontline experience of fighting Line 3. They've been up more times than I have. So first of all, I want to say hello from your neighbors to the south. The Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul are on occupied Dakota land. Line 3 cuts through all that and more, including Anishinaabe and White Earth land. And yeah, so Tori and I, to give context about our evening, just came from a protest for Amir Locke, who was murdered by the Minneapolis Police Department in a raid on the complete wrong apartment. He had done nothing, and he was brutally killed. And that police corruption and incompetence and lack of oversight is relevant, because that is the same police department that will send officers, that has sent officers up to protect Line 3 and enforce the rights of Enbridge Oil and Gas over the rights of Indigenous peoples. So Line 3 goes from Canada through Wisconsin and through most of Minnesota. And it's going to pump billions of gallons of dirty tar sands A lot of the construction of it has seen several spills of drilling fluids already into natural water systems. A lot of the pipe materials have just been left out for multiple years outside in the elements, which seeps deadly chemicals into land and makes the pipeline less reliable once it is built. And the reason why the Climate Justice Committee thinks it's so important, as a group that is based in the big city, the capital of Minnesota, thinks it is so important to go up north and still do show up for these struggles for Black and Indigenous life, is that we know that climate change would not even be possible without the murder of Indigenous peoples, the expropriation of their land, and the theft of Black people and labor from Africa. In order to have the industrial system that creates anthropogenic climate change, you need to have land to steal and people to work that land. And that happened right here in Turtle Island. And so we find it incredibly important to show up to conferences like this and to struggles like the one for Amir Locke, to advocate for Indigenous self-determination, to advocate for things like breaking up with Canada, if that's what it calls for. And so, yes, that's how I would summarize our group quickly and summarize our struggle. We would not identify as, Tori and I would not necessarily identify as leaders in the struggle against Line 3. More so we're like rank and file, we do what we can. We plug in people from the cities to go up north when that was going on. And now that the pipeline is finished and pumping, we are reorganizing our struggle to get its water rights permits revoked, to put federal pressure on investigating it, on how environmentally shaky it is, to say nothing of all the Indigenous rights which it tramples upon. And I'll just keep myself brief, and I'll hand it over to Tori to tell you more about the Frontline water protection experience.
Yeah, thank you, CJ, and thank you all so much. It's an honor to be here. Over the spring and the summer of last year, I had the great honor and duty, I believe, as a white settler on this land to respond to calls from Indigenous movement leaders to go up to the front lines in northern Minnesota. And played just a very small role in resisting pipeline construction. I just feel so incredibly grateful and in awe of all frontliners everywhere. And I'm so appreciative of this opportunity to connect with other people on front lines. At this point, as CJ said, like the pipeline may be operational, construction may be complete, but the fight absolutely continues here in Minnesota against Line 3, revoking permits. So many people in power could easily shut down the pipeline at any time. And of course, people are still really strongly mobilized to fight the pipeline. A lot of organizers and resistance camps are also doing really incredible work around land back initiatives. I'm thinking specifically of Camp McGeezy. You can find out more about them. Their Instagram is McGeezy Will Fly. Led non-hierarchically by the incredible Tasha Martineau. Camps are also shifting to not only be fighting Line 3, but also to join resistance against Line 5 and the rerouting of Line 5 in Wisconsin, as well as Enbridge's expansion of a terminal in Texas. So this really evil corporation's roots really extend nationally and internationally. And people in Minnesota are working at all levels with that, with a diversity of tactics. My personal experience, like I'm facing charges that were created directly to deter Line 3 protesters, like laws that literally didn't exist except to deter protesters. It didn't work. People kept showing up and kept fighting. And there are folks who are now facing much higher charges than me. In really good news, a lot of those higher felony charges are starting to be dropped in court. A lot of water protectors are, people are really at all different stages in the legal process. But some of the felony charges are being dropped, which is really feels like the least we could ask for, but is still a sliver of good news. Yeah, I think that's all. I'll drop a link in the chat of like ways to support legal defense funds, and also for Camp McGeezy, which is again just one of the resistance camps that continues to be a space for Indigenous sovereignty and frontline work and direct action. And I know that they are still looking for lots of support as well. Anything to add, CJ?
Just a few things that I know. Our friend Kat, who could not join us tonight, but has also been arrested in the fight against Line 3. They have specific and personal experience with the police doing things like rotor washing, which is where you get a helicopter and you get it to scatter gravel and dirt directly at people and pelt them with it. They like detained people for over 24 hours without food or water or access to outside contact or legal recourse. So yeah, it really is, they pulled out all the stops to brutalize and intimidate people, and nevertheless, people still kept showing up, and they keep showing up. And especially in Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul, where we had the George Floyd uprising of 2020, people I think have in a lot of ways woken up to that kind of brutality and the way that it can and will be used against them. And just the only people who will protect us are us. And it is so important to build these movement spaces and these movement networks, because we can't rely on the state to protect us, obviously, or work in our best interests. So this kind of solidarity work and this is how we keep us safe. And I just want to thank everybody again for having us on. And I am so amazed and humbled at all of the awesome Indigenous leaders in this chat. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you all. Miigwech.
Thank you to Tori and to CJ for making the time to be with us tonight. I know, as you were saying, you were involved in many other important struggles, but of course, all connected to issues of climate justice and social justice, and fighting the war against people both at home here within the borders of North America or abroad. When you were talking about the helicopters and the use of helicopters or the use of militarized police, we can't forget also that these are the same weapons that are turned against people in Afghanistan, Iraq, all across the Middle East and North Africa. And Canada, at the same time as they're attacking Wet'suwet'en, is also planning to spend millions, tens of millions of dollars on new fighter jets. And all of this is connected. So thank you for that perspective and for making the time to be with us. And we look forward to sharing more about our common struggles and building a more united and stronger climate justice movement. For our final speaker tonight, before we go into Q&A, there've already been bunches of, really great comments in the chat, some perspectives, lots of solidarity, but also a few questions scattered in. I want to invite up Thomas Davies. Thomas is a central organizer with Climate Convergence. He's a unionized pipe fitter and power engineer, and he's also the author of System Change, Not Climate Change from Battle of Ideas Press, which we'll put information for how to get this in the chat. So Thomas, you have the big job of going last. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you to everybody who is tuning in to watch this and participate. And thank you very much to everybody who is presented so far. I'm going to try and be brief because I think there's lots of people that have lots of good questions and points to make. But I think it's important to give an update on what's going on with resistance against the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion here in the Lower Mainland, and give some perspective that we have on a fight that has been ongoing and is definitely challenging, but still presents lots of opportunities for important resistance. I noticed there's lots of people in the chat or from places that are not from British Columbia, so I wanted to make sure that kind of people understood the general scope of the TMX pipeline. In 2012, Texas Oil Corporation, Kinder Morgan, proposed building another pipeline from Edmonton, where close to where the tar sands are located, all the way to Vancouver, to what they called Twin, the existing Kinder Morgan pipeline. And what that would do would be to triple the diluted bitumen that was traveling from Edmonton to Vancouver to about 900,000 barrels a day, which would then be put on tankers that would go from 60 to 400 to more than 400 per year, which is a huge increase. And so that it was in 2012 that they proposed it. In 2013, when they applied to what was called then the National Energy Board to start the project. So it's literally been a decade of struggle, and ever since the project was proposed or discussed, has faced resistance from all walks of life, and definitely led by Indigenous nations who, when the original Kinder Morgan pipeline or Trans Mountain pipeline was constructed, didn't even have the legal right to oppose it. So this pipeline, for the last 10 years, we've been fighting it. And I think we really need to remember that in 2018, Kinder Morgan walked away from the project. The opposition had made it, in their view, unprofitable and not a good business decision. And that was based because of the long-term opposition, not because they all of a sudden decided that oil and diluted bitumen were like not good products or not good for the planet. And the Canadian government stepped in and bought the project for $4.5 billion, which at that time was well over $1 billion more than the project was worth. And also the original projection for how much the project was going to cost was originally 4.5 billion as well. It went up to 7.2 billion of taxpayer dollars as a projected cost, when that's what we were told it was going to cost in 2018. I'm going to give some updated figures about what the costs are, which are pretty incredible. And again, this isn't like Justin Trudeau spending it out of his pocket. This is taxpayer money. This is money that comes from everybody, which means that we have power and also responsibility to make sure that this project is stopped. Recently in the Lower Mainland, Trans Mountain applied and was granted the ability to try and re-drill under the Fraser River, which is the major salmon spawning river in British Columbia. They botched the first attempt. They're completely unclear on what the failures were. They're very vague about the terminology, but they've already tried to drill under this sacred river that is so important for the ecosystem through British Columbia, failed, and are trying again. In this process, a sinkhole opened up very close to the Maryhill bypass, which probably means not much to somebody in the Twin Cities, but here in Vancouver, it's a very important commuter artery. And they were absolutely quiet about it, and have been completely. They had to be forced to acknowledge that it was even related to the drilling and to the work that they were doing nearby. And they've also had problems with the city of Burnaby again. Originally, they applied and were able to, again, by the national, what was originally called the National Energy Board, but now there's the Canadian Energy Regulator, which is the independent board, which is all appointed, basically oil and gas related executives who decide whether or not things can go forward. So they already bypassed the city of Burnaby's bylaws to cut down thousands of trees, and now they're refusing to do the minimum city of Burnaby bylaws as far as the road that's supposed to be used for the fire protection vehicles around the tank farm on Burnaby Mountain. And as people here know, that tank farm sits right below the Simon Fraser University and a growing community up there of tens of thousands of people. And it's right at the intersection of the only two roads off of the mountain. And the Burnaby Fire Department has said time and time again that there's very little capacity or ability to fight the fire and to save people if something happens at the tank farm, especially given the expansion. And Trans Mountain to this day refuses to do even the minimum. They're willing to drill under all of these important rivers and create such catastrophes and risks, but to make the radius of their road a little bit wider or to make the actual road a bit wider, somehow that's unreasonable, and they refuse to do even that minimum, which I think shows how much respect or how much they care for the lives of the people who are impacted by their project. And that's also shown, those of us who live in Burnaby can see the construction right now is happening literally across the street from Burnaby Mountain Secondary School. So kids going to school, like literally across the street is heavy construction, and they're going to run a diluted bitumen pipeline right there. And I think it's really important to say that like the way that we found out about these things is not from the Trans Mountain informing the public in any transparent ways, from the major media making sure to hold them accountable, from government officials like really taking them to tasks and making sure that they're held accountable for things that are happening in places where they're supposedly elected to represent. It is from grassroots climate justice activists who are on the ground, pouring through documents, taking their own photos, going to the media, and that's how these things are found out. Protect the Planet, Stop TMX, another local grassroots organization, has done really important work. And I'll paste at the end of this a link to on February 14th as well, there's a court support rally for 6 people who were arrested for trying to stop trees from being cut from the pipeline's path in Burnaby, as well as a new local petition to stop the construction next to Burnaby Mountain Secondary School. So these are local kind of controversies, and people who live here are starting to understand more and more what it means to have a pipeline construction going on in literally your backyard, which is something that we hear about and we've seen Indigenous nations fight, but we're getting a better sense of now, and to can appreciate the devastation that's going on and that has been going on for so long. But those are local, but also like overall, the pipeline has faced so many delays and so much controversy. It was last year when Samatar Sahal, a father of 4, died when he was crushed by a heavy duty construction operation related to the pipeline outside of Edmonton. Trans Mountain was forced to stop construction for 7 weeks due to systemic non-compliance with COVID-19 protocols. They had another 4-month stop work order in Burnaby when it was found that the subcontractors were cutting trees in active nested areas of protected migratory birds. And this was only brought to light because of the hard work of local climate justice activists. Again, they had more delays and problems during the recent huge forest fires that caused the Coquihalla Highway, which is that runs basically parallel with the TMX construction sites in many places, to be evacuated. And then also the recent atmospheric rivers and the huge rains and floods that happened in British Columbia in November caused these floods and landslides that were made worse because of by the forest fires earlier. And they wiped out huge sections of the highway and exposed the original Trans Mountain pipeline, which I think has many of the same problems that Line 3 has, so it's just deteriorating and decomposing and contaminating the land around it. All of these things are making the construction much worse, but also kind of highlighting how incredibly ridiculous and catastrophic it is to try and be building it right now. And what I'd say is that all of these can be considered man-made crises because they're either related directly to the pipeline construction by direct negligence by Trans Mountain specifically, or in the cause of the forest fires or the atmospheric rivers are because of long-term negligence by oil and gas corporations and governments which prioritize their profits and have really exacerbated these extreme weather events. So, like I said, at the time that Kinder Morgan first proposed the project, they gave a price tag of about 4.5 billion. That went up to 7.4 billion when the Canadian government purchased it, and then kind of went up to 9.3 billion afterwards. And then on February 7th, 2020, 2 years ago, basically, the new estimate was 12.6 billion, nearly 3 times the original estimate. It's been 2 years since we've gotten a cost estimate or projection from Trans Mountain. And you can bet if they were ahead of schedule and under budget, they would be telling us constantly. But 2 years without any update, I think shows again the accountability that they feel towards people, taxpayers whose money is being used to purchase and bankroll this project, but also that things are not going well. And even oil executives and like large major media are speculating it's going to be at least $20 billion now, just for now. So there's a big call to demand that Trans Mountain release its figures and release its information as far as what its economic projections are. This is important information, like I said, regarding accountability, but also there's a reason they're not telling us what the numbers are, because they know that that's something that's really important to people in a time of economic crisis where people's lives and their livelihoods are under attack and their ability to live and things are more expensive and harder to come by, that they're spending $20 billion at least on a project with a budget that keeps ballooning is something that we're very angry about. People who find out about are very angry about. So I think that's very obvious why they're trying to hide from us. So now the timeline for construction was that it was supposed to be done in by the end of this year, but now they're saying maybe by the end of 2023, probably into 2024. And that, again, that's not Trans Mountain that's giving us these like updates as like a response, some sort of responsible partner. But these are industry insiders that are speculating just from looking at what state the project is in. Trans Mountain has already said that every month that the project is delayed costs $100 million. And again, like we're for delaying the project, we're for canceling the project. But $100 million a month is a huge amount, again, of taxpayer dollars that is going to fund this climate catastrophe. And so what I wanted to say is that we continue to organize against this project. It's far, far from done. And there's so many places where there's challenges and so many places where they're behind schedule and so many places where they're trying to hide things. And every time we go out and organize in public, we meet people who either still don't know about the project, who thought it was done a long time ago, who don't understand the ramifications, who didn't know that that's why all those trees were getting cut down. There's still a lot of education to be done, and there's still a lot of people that oppose the project. I remind myself often, and I think it's worth reminding people that the movement against the Dakota Access Pipeline in Standing Rock didn't really take off until what was supposed to be the last months of that project's construction. Again, going under a waterway, and that's a common theme, I think, along these projects. But that exploded and really threw that project into turmoil and brought tens of thousands of people together and really pushed the movement forward. And really, I think, was a turning point for fighting these oil and gas corporations, their pipelines, and for unity between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people fighting against these things, and understanding, like Slato said, that we're not just fighting this for ourselves. We understand that we're all part of the same planet, we're all part of the same ecosystem, and that defending Indigenous rights and defending human rights and stopping these pipelines is in everyone's benefit, except for a very, very small rich minority. So we have lots of time, I wouldn't say lots of time, but lots of opportunities to continue fighting. And there's lots of things that are changing in Canada and around the world. The climate crisis is not going away. People cannot ignore it because of their daily lives and because there's a better understanding of it everywhere. And also in Canada, it's definitely definitely an incomplete process, but there is more and more recognition of what Indigenous rights mean, of what it means that this country was founded on Indigenous nations' territories. The exposure of the residential schools and all of the unmarked graves across this country, and the violence that was used against Indigenous nations as part of founding this country, and that has been part of this country's history since day one, and has been part of building these huge mega oil and gas corporation profits and pipelines since day one. And it's something that we need to stop. I would say that, like COVID-19, the climate crisis cannot be solved by business as usual, by prioritizing profits over people, by relying on capitalism, by relying on the markets, by relying on the better judgment of oil and gas corporations and government leaders. It can be done by mass movements, by people taking collective action, by building unity, by understanding that our fates and our futures are tied together so tightly as poor working and Indigenous people fighting for a better and sustainable world. And that when we fight against pipelines like Trans Mountain, like Coastal GasLink, like Line 3, we're not fighting just against pipelines, but we really are fighting for a better future, and that these struggles are an important part of that. So I really wanted to thank everybody tonight, and I look forward to the question and answer and discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. And that brings us to the end of a really great panel, I think. We've been provided with a lot of different perspectives, but I think overall, something that unites what everyone said is that we keep fighting. We keep standing up against all odds and supporting one another and fighting back. And I think it's really great to have the perspective of Line 3, where you say, look, this pipeline is built, there's oil pumping, and it's still not too late to stop the destruction that it's causing and to end really the trampling of Indigenous rights. And so, of course, we do not want Trans Mountain or CGL to get even close to that point, but it is never too late to keep struggling. And I think that has been a uniting factor between all of these presentations. I encourage people to, again, donate. We've looked at the donation on, at least on the GoFundMe for the GICSEN Legal Defenders Fund. And I can see that people participating in this webinar have donated. So thank you if you have. And we'll put that in the chat again, just as a reminder. And there's some good initial discussions, I think, to continue contributing to our discussion, one of which is directed at Slato. And what people are wondering really is about how the Gidimt'en camp is doing now after all of the destruction that was brought on by the RCMP in November. You talked a bit about your continued battles in court, but how's the camp doing now? Are folks still occupying the land, and are there allies there as well? And then tagged onto that, do need supporters, and how can people get keyed in to joining in support?
Yeah, thanks for that. There is still occupation happening on Get-em-Den territory. In November, Coyote Camp, which was the drill pad occupation, obviously was raided by the RCMP, and at that time CGL with RCMP escort bulldozed all of our infrastructure, all of our belongings, burnt down the cabin that was built there, and destroyed everything. And so right now there's currently an occupation at Get-em-Den checkpoint, which is the occupation site that's been there at 44 kilometer in the territory. And so that's continuing on. There was a reoccupation of Coyote Camp in December, and then the RCMP were amassing. And so there was a strategic retreat that happened so that we didn't experience more arrests there. But there is still activity happening on the territory, and people should know that you know, drilling under Wodzinqua is something that could be happening within, like, they're planning to have it start drilling within like the next month or two. So it's very imminent. We are asking for supporters to come to the territory, and you can visit yintoaccess.com to apply to come to camp, and there is a process, and we ask that people bring skills, be comfortable in the bush, and be comfortable, you know, in a conflict zone. This is a conflict zone, like Brandy said. It's, you know, at times it's like a war zone out here. So yeah, please keep those things in mind, and we do appreciate everybody's support, and we do always welcome people to come to the territory. So visit our website for more information on that.
Great, thank you. And I will say that Brandy did have to leave. She had some other commitments tonight, so she had to log off. But thank you again to Brandy for coming and sharing with us today. And I encourage people to follow her work. We'll put her information in the chat again. The next question, and there's been kind of a few questions circling around it, comes from an anonymous attendee. It says, "Thank you so much to all panelists for your bravery and commitment to environmental justice. I'm interested to know, do you believe that the proposal to make, quote, ecocide an international crime could help end the brutalization of land defenders and to end environmental destruction due to pipelines like Coastal GasLink? Ecocide refers to the mass damage and destruction of the natural world." So just that specific question then around that, kind of the use of international law, if that's one of the places that we can be battling or should be battling. CJ, go ahead.
Yeah, so the way that I started as an activist and the way that I cut my teeth essentially was as an anti-war activist. And the tricky thing about international law as it relates to anti-war and living in the United States is that it's very difficult to hold, especially dominant imperial settler nations to account in terms of international law. You know, the US military commits war crimes constantly, is beholden to essentially no one, has stated before that it is willing to storm the Hague if any of its people are tried. And of course, this is also a major issue around the Israel-Palestine conflict and the assertion of Palestinian indigenous rights. But at the same time, I do think that it's important to realize that simply because we advocate for a legal struggle as well as an on-the-ground struggle doesn't mean that it's a binary choice. Legal defense and struggles, in addition to on-the-ground defense and struggles, work to help one another. So I am in favor of using ecocide international law, but I wouldn't expect it to get all of the work done for us, especially if it's trying to hold to account American corporations and Canadian corporations. With Line 3 specifically, there is currently a case moving forward that names the Sacred Wild Rice as a plaintiff. And of course, the Department of Natural Resources in Minnesota wants it thrown out ASAP. And I think that itself is indication that maybe that case has legs. Yes, I also love wild rice, Christine. But yes, so that's basically my quick and dirty summary of that. And I will, speaking of legal defense, I'll drop a link in the chat for everyone to see where they can support Line 3 legal defense stuff.
Thank you, CJ. Does anyone else want to remark on the use of international law on this question? Slido, yeah, go ahead.
This is Slido. Yeah, so we've had discussions with folks organizing around ecocide becoming an international law. And, you know, I agree that I think it's really useful and can be really useful in the future. And we have to start normalizing and changing the structures that we're working within. You know, we've realized in our fight that, you know, the legal system is not somewhere that we're going to win. If things are changed and those structures and systems are, you know, are rebuilt with a justice lens and by Indigenous people and by, you know, people who understand the problems with those structures, I think that they can be useful. But I agree that on the ground, direct action has been the only thing for us anyway that's been effective. And so we have to use every tool that's available to us, but only so far as that it's not going to undermine our Indigenous sovereignty and the work that we're doing on the ground that's actually stopping the construction of.
Thank you. And well, we obviously, though, someone else is wondering more about what other Indigenous nations in the same region as Wet'suwet'en are active against CGL and how.
There's a lot of other Indigenous nations that are actively protecting their territories in the area. Wet'suwet'en have been the strongest voice, and most of the other nations, most of the other bands in the areas have signed on to the agreement. They've been either, you know, coerced or extorted into signing on to agreements because their communities have been so impoverished and exploited by Canada and by BC. But we do have allies in the area that are participating in solidarity actions and that support us, like the Giksan, that are ancient allies to the Wet'suwet'en and our next door neighbors. We also have support from the Haida Nation. We've just finished having a gathering in Wet'suwet'en territory where a bunch of different nations came and supported a Wet'suwet'en declaration.
Thank you. There's, I think, an important point to bring up when it comes also to the question of international law is there have been rulings against the government of Canada. There have been rulings by the United Nations or declarations made from different working groups actually calling on the government of BC and the government of Canada to stop Site C construction, to stop the TMX and CDL construction. Because they do violate international laws related to free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous nations to resource extraction projects on their territories. And I think while those are important, we need to use that information, those declarations, those condemnations of the government of Canada, really to mobilize people to our side, to show people the hypocrisy and bankruptcy of the government of Canada or of BC when it comes to supporting out of one side of their mouth so-called reconciliation with Indigenous nations and climate agreements, signing climate agreements, while at the other side of their mouth subsidizing oil and gas companies to a very great degree, continuing basically to fund the oil and gas industry in Canada with tax dollars, while and destroying Indigenous rights and title. So thank you, and thank you everyone for your questions. I think we'll kind of give speakers basically a chance to wrap up. I wanted to call attention to the chat. I wanted to make sure everyone saw the post by Ruth Walmsley, who is posting about the case of the Brunette 6. There's going to be a mobilization, Brunette River 6. There's going to be a mobilization on Monday, February 14th, 9 to 10 a.m. at the BC Supreme Court. These are people arrested for peaceful protest against the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, and they're going to be facing their days in court, possibly 14 to 28. So 2 weeks to a month in jail for their peaceful defense of the land against Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. There's going to be a number of cases coming up here in the Lower Mainland of BC, but also Wet'suwet'en, as we learned, and around the country, that are important for us to follow and support. As I said, a climate justice movement must also have the demand to drop all charges against land defenders. And I wanted to invite people to the next Climate Convergence organizing meeting. Meetings are still happening on Zoom, which means you can join from anywhere in the province, and we encourage you to join and participate. We'll put a link in the chat. The next meeting is going to take place on February 16th at 7 p.m. and we will talk about organizing against Trans Mountain Site C and CGL here in the Lower Mainland, and also upcoming webinars and other events. So the information is in the chat. You can email us anytime for the login information. Also put in the chat all of Climate Convergence's social media, and I encourage you to follow it and share from it. As I said, we'll be posting this video on our YouTube just after we finish together here tonight. So I'm going to ask the speakers if they have any sort of final wrap-up comments, and then we'll go ahead and close for tonight. It's been a great webinar and discussion so far. Slay, though, if you'd like to go first or wouldn't mind.
Sure. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And I just really encourage everybody to support the GICSAN Legal to Fund. All I have on my mind is defunding. Defund CGL pipeline. Please support the GICSAN. They have been a huge ally to us, and we've received so much support, and we really want to thank everybody for that, and thank everybody for bringing attention to our struggle. The GICSAN have been working very hard, and they have also, they have their hereditary system in place that they're protecting their lands according to their laws, and they have just been amazing allies to us. And so we really support this this panel tonight, and everybody to support them in their legal struggle and the charges that they're facing and the criminalization that they're facing. So please go and support them. Oh, it's
All right, next, CJ and Tori from Minnesota, Climate Justice Committee in Minnesota.
Yeah, thank you all for attending, and to the organizers and fellow panelists. It's been really wonderful to learn more about each of these struggles and share a little bit about Line 3 resistance in Minnesota. Yeah, I would plug again, if anybody is able to spare some funds for Line 3 water protectors who are facing charges, as well as the ongoing support of resistance camps. Yeah, all pipelines are evil. Death them all. DJ?
Doom to the pipeline, as we say usually on the street, but much louder. Yeah, I will just be putting in some more resources around Line 3. These are not our resources specifically. These are like movement resources. No one person's name is really on them. But I'll be putting in resources about the fight against Line 3 in the chat, as well as where you can find the Climate Justice Committee on Facebook and Instagram. And I'd like to say thank you again.
All right, and Thomas, I think I mentioned before, but April Thomas had to sign off, as well as Brandy Morin. So again, thank you from Climate Convergence to those two panelists. They weren't able to join into the Q&A, but that means, Thomas, you are last to wrap up.
Okay. There was one question about what the difference are between nations/bands that sign and others that don't sign to an agreement. in terms of resources and saving their people. You mentioned some have very big needs to cover. I'll do my best if Slato or wants to jump in or complete this thought, but we see time and time again governments saying, well, we've got this and this and this band support, and this band has signed an agreement, but I think you can't discuss any question at all, and specifically, especially Indigenous, the situation of Indigenous nations specifically, without the context of having oil and gas corporations and governments come in and say, either you sign an agreement and you get some funding for your community, or you don't sign an agreement and we're still going to build this. And then you see what happens to people who stand up on principle. People like Slato and her husband, who are basically, like she said, under home arrest or unable to leave their homes and are targeted, who have their identity questioned by oil and gas corporations in really disgusting ways and really make life so difficult. So I don't think it's for us to comment and to judge and to make it and to really make a point out of who's signing and who's not signing, but we need to understand the context. So we need to understand that Indigenous nations and Indigenous people face huge exploitation challenges, racism, and economic challenges because of the history of Canada and the way the Canadian government and oil and gas corporations have related to them. And that's ongoing in the way that they enforce these agreements. My only final thought is that there is a lot of anger and confusion in the world today among poor and working and oppressed people. There's also a lot of struggle, a lot of hope. And in that is a lot of opportunity. And we need to make sure that we are in spaces and we are in the public and we are answering questions and we are putting forward visions and we are explaining what our reasons are for what we oppose and what we support, and making sure that coherent, positive, and in some ways revolutionary messages are present in the discourse. It's very dangerous if those things don't happen, but there is a lot of possibility for change, and there is definitely a lot of time and still time to stop these specific projects and to build the better and sustainable world that I think we all know is so necessary and so possible. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you again to everyone. Slato, thank you personally from me and from Climate Convergence for making the time to join us and for bringing the up-to-date information about how we can support what's happening in Wet'suwet'en against the Coastal GasLink pipeline. We have to really be able to connect no matter the many kilometers, thousands of kilometers of distance between us in order to build support across BC, across Canada, around North America, but also to recognize that this is a worldwide struggle for our Mother Earth, for the future of humanity that we are involved in. We know that that is intrinsically tied to the struggle for Indigenous rights. And we know that it is not possible really to win the just, sustainable world that we are looking for without system change. And so that's why I encourage people to get involved in Climate Convergence, to come to our next meeting. It's Wednesday, February 16th, where we can discuss building this worldwide struggle and really continue this work across so many different platforms and in so many different ways. Appreciative of the Minnesota Climate Justice Committee. Let's stay more connected. Let's continue learning about our common struggles, building united for this better world that we know is possible. And for those of you asking about links in the chat, we will send a follow-up email. Because we use the webinar function on Zoom, it is not possible to save what is happening with the chat, and it's not a setting that we can change. So I do apologize for that. Also, again, Thomas Davies' book, Battle of Ideas Press, System Change, Not Climate Change. The information for ordering that is in the chat. And someone has just said they copy and paste the chat, which is an alternative, though sometimes frustrating method. So thanks for your patience with that and for everyone's participation, questions, and thoughts today. We will see you out in the streets or online, building this worldwide struggle for a better, more just world and demanding system change, not climate change. We will win.